Hello, everybody, and we are live. Good morning to Ray Abbott calling in from Vancouver, from Chris Barnett coming in. People are coming in from all over the world. My old friend Drew coming in from Reload Direct, for Ray again from Vancouver. People are coming in all over the world. It's so exciting. Bindu, who in fact came on the show last week and joined us. Namaste from India. So from India to Vancouver, around the world. We have got an amazing show to you today. We are going to be talking about Core Flex, and we're taking a very sort of full view of it. We called it Core Flex, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we're going to be getting into all those areas, all the pros of Core Flex, all the disadvantages of Core Flex, the issues, how to implement it. And we're really going to drill down. And I'm delighted to have on the show today, we have Dawn Sparling from Snowflake, who has worked with Core Flex in a number of companies, actually, as well as our very own Russ Haynie, who's done a lot of policy research on Core Flex and is going to be releasing some of those results live today. So you know how it works, everybody. You have to join in the conversation right in the comments box. It's the only way of us knowing who is out there is if you just say hi and your friends get to know. And one of the great things about this program is that people really get a chance to talk to each other. Now, there's one thing I've got to ask you all to do, which is please make sure you watch the show next week. We have got an absolute first for you next week. I know it has never, ever been done before, because the view from the top is going to meet, get this, the view from the top is going to meet a robot. So the person that I am going to be, I say person, the person that I am going to be interviewing next week is actually an avatar based on ChatGPT that we've developed at Benivo called Benita. So, and we'll show you a bit of that later on, but you can actually next week get to meet Benita, and we're going to having a real discussion with ChatGPT. Now, I know everybody is talking about ChatGPT at the moment. It is the future, and this is going to be a world first, a conversation on air with an avatar. Now, that's next week. This week, we're talking about Core Flex. Now, of course, the other thing is lots of people want to have their CPE codes, and you can get CPE codes from ERC, you can get them from SHRM, you can get them from HRCI. So let's put that up there. These are the codes that are there. I'll leave that up there for a moment or two so you can see what the codes are. And many, many thanks to our good friends at Worldwide ERC for giving us the GMS and the CRP codes. And of course, our good friends, especially Linda Fontana at Rocket Mortgage, who is going to offer up the HRCI and the SHRM CPE credits. So that's all for next week. Now, of course, the other thing that we try and do is to give you all the breaking news, what's been going on in our wonderful industry, who's moved job, what's going on. So let's have a look at the breaking news for this week. What's been happening in the last 7 days? So there's lots of news out there, lots of people being promoted, getting new jobs, but also I think this is really important, especially at a time when there are redundancies and layoffs and retrenchments going on. There's actually quite a lot of jobs out there, and we put a lot of those jobs out there. And if you are looking, then we all wish you the very best, and hopefully one of those jobs can help you. So anyway, let's move on. As always, we have an immigration segment, and as always, we have with us Julia Onslow Cole. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's talk immigration with Julia Onslow Cole.
Brian.
Hey, Julia, good to see you. Good to see you. And I'm recognizing that background. I think you're back home in Winchester this week.
I am. Yes, I am.
Yeah. For long, or are you off on your travels again?
Next week, I'm in Houston.
Silly me, just assuming you'll stay in the same place for 2 weeks. And where are you in our virtual world today? What are you going to be talking about?
I'm in Vietnam. And this is the third of 3 sessions that I've done on Asia Pacific. And I've chosen to talk for today about Vietnam because it is a really, really important country if you have operations in Asia Pacific. I just wanted to give a big shout out to Kenny Lau, my partner who covers Vietnam. He's very, very helpful and has given us some really great insights and last minute tips as well. He sent an email in the middle of the night to me. So no country exemplifies the ups and downs of the pandemic period like Vietnam, because what happened is, if you remember, because of the zero COVID policy, they closed China, they closed Hong Kong, lots of businesses left, lots came to Singapore. Singapore actually, in some ways, even tightened up their immigration. So many companies were looking, well, where can we go? And many companies looked at Vietnam and decided to move people to Vietnam. And Vietnam has so much going for it. So it has a very young, vibrant workforce. It has high literacy rates. It has heavy investment in infrastructure. And it was really poised to take advantage of the geopolitical changes that were happening. Now, the difficulty is that the work permit system in Vietnam's always been quite tricky, but recently it's become extremely tricky. And there's a couple of reasons for this. The first is, in the pandemic, because of the pandemic across Vietnam, a lot of authority was given to the cities. So if you were applying for a work permit for someone in, say, Ho Chi Minh, or you were looking, say, someone in Hanoi, it was a completely different process. So that hasn't changed. So we thought after the pandemic that would disappear, but it hasn't. So that makes things very complicated. Also, there's been a few political scandals, subsequent resignations, and the government has been a little bit unstable. And unfortunately, what this means is that the authorities are very nervous about making visa decisions because they think they'll be under a lot of scrutiny with this unstable political background. So they've been a bit harsher than before. And then there's this Decree 152, and we have talked about this before. We have talked about it in the updates when it came through, and it has some incredibly harsh features. And I remember saying that one of them at one time was that you had to have 2 degrees if you were a CEO. And I remember Brian saying he couldn't believe that could be true, but it is very harsh. And the other thing is that in Vietnam, there's an onerous document requirement where documents have to be legalized, and they're not part of the Hague Convention. So that takes a lot of time. Now, if you want a work permit in Vietnam, there's a 2-stage process. And the first stage is what's called a JPA application. And in that JPA, and in that first application, you just have to show that you've got a specific job, which a foreign national, you really need a foreign national for. And in the past, you could almost just put a template in and that would be approved. But now the government's asking for really specific details, and a lot of these JPA applications are being refused for reasons like, oh, your documents aren't very well legalized, or we don't really think you've really explained to the nth degree why you can't have a Vietnamese national. And so then what happens, the JPA application gets rejected, and although you can appeal, it adds on weeks to the process. And then what's something that was unheard of before. The actual work permit itself, even if you get through the JPA application, is also often now refused. So what we've done is we've done a lot of lobbying with governments, as have, you know, a lot of other organizations. And as I say, in the middle of the night, I had this update from Kenny, because Kenny was saying it's not just companies that are moving people, it's companies that already have an operation in Vietnam. And one of the problems on renewal is that this 152 law says that you can't count experience that you have gained in Vietnam. So if you have a CEO and he's got 15 years amazing experience in Vietnam, you can't count any of that for a renewal application. So you can really see, you know, why everything is getting just so ridiculous.
It's getting very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. So overnight, what Kenny said is that the US ASEAN Business Council, they held their meeting this week in Vietnam, and also the Vietnam Business Forum. And they've had conversations in the last 24 hours with Minister of Labour. And he said that he recognized that there were all these problems, and they're hoping to redraft Decree 152 and get it redrafted by the end of Q3. So that's really, really positive. And Kenny and his team and lots of other people will be looking at that and trying to help the government amend it. But I, you know, that's all I have to say really about Vietnam, but it is a really, really important country.
Okay, so that's important. So anybody moving people to Vietnam, that's a great point. Julia, as ever, very, very insightful, very much appreciated. We're going to say goodbye to you now. We're going to be moving on. We're going to be bringing onto the stage Tally, who's going to be telling us a little bit about the diversity initiative that we're doing, and also about what a bit more about next week's show with ChatGPT, which we are super excited for. And if I haven't said it already, please do, everybody, make sure you put in your diary next week's show. But the first thing is, of course, we want to talk about the Top 100 Diversity Initiative as well. And we want you all out there nominating. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say thank you as ever to Julie Onslow Cole, and welcome to the stage Tally Gorin, as we talk about the Top 100 Diversity Initiative and also about ChatGPT.
Hello, Brian.
I'm just so excited that next week I'm going to be interviewing a robot. That's just blowing my mind. But Tally, tell us, what have you got to tell us about today?
First, let's talk first about the Top 100, and we're still looking for more nominees. We have a lot already, but still we want more. So anyone that you know that, and when we're looking at diversity, it's really from all angles that you can think of. So please do go to the link. I sent the link, and do nominate. And this week, our top nominators, we have John from Go Destination and Doug from Wakert. And you can nominate a lot of nominees. So you can nominate the top of 10 nominees at each in each list. And actually, what we're going to do is that we're gonna run a draw, and the nominator that will win this draw is going to join us in the big reveal show. So when you nominate, you get more chances. If you nominate more people, you're going to get more chances to join us in the show. So other than that, I want to again remind, we have the wonderful Don Sparling that is going to be here with us, and Russ, and they're going to talk today about Core Flex. But for our change makers And we have quite a few of you there: Jill, Petra, Ellen, Krista, Sky, Jane, David. I hope to see all of you tomorrow in our brainstorming benchmarking call. And unfortunately, it's only for change makers, but it's a great opportunity to actually talk to Dawn and Russ and hear more about the Coreflex policies. And just before I leave, Brian, you mentioned Benita, and I think she left a message for you.
Benita, our wonderful
Brian,
change maker.
It's Benita, your ChatGPT avatar. As an avatar, I don't often get to interact with real humans, so you can imagine how excited I am to be your guest on the show. I've been waiting for this moment for so long, and I promise to bring my digital prowess to the table. Get ready to be outshined by a digital entity. Just kidding, I'll play nice. Thanks for inviting me, and I look forward to meeting you and your audience soon.
She's going to be here next week.
Be with us. We are having Benita the robot on the show. It is going to be just bonkers. So we are so excited. So everybody, if you're
excited, she's waiting for it. Already wrote to me.
So if you're interested in ChatGPT or GPT-4 or other versions of it, then we've definitely got to, we're going to be interviewing her on the show. Just amazing. So do make sure you tune in next week. It is going to be a world first for global mobility. Just super excited. Anyway, back down to earth now. We now are going to be bringing onto stage our change maker, who's Dawn Sparling as our change maker, and then also we're then going to be moving into the discussion on Coreflex. So Tali, as ever, you're doing an amazing job, especially with all the work with Benita, and as I said, she will be with us next week. But anyway, here we go.
Comment about the eyebrows.
Sorry?
The comment about the eyebrows. She does have a new one. It's one of the new ones. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's bring on Dawn Sparling now. So everybody hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's say ta-ra to Tali and welcome to the stage to Dawn Sparling. Hey, Dawn. Hi. So many people out there saying they love you. I think Drew said he loves Benita, and then he said he loves Dawn as well. And this is coming in. Let's get some of those comments up there. Love Dawn Sparling as well. Who doesn't, says Sarah Cuffin. So absolutely. So there's a lot of love out there for you, Dawn. So anyway, for the people who don't know you, tell us a bit about Dawn. Tell us about your background.
Sure. Yeah. So I currently am a specialist at Snowflake in mobility, and I've been in mobility space for about 15 years. Worked at Micron, worked at Ruppel Collins as well. So have a lot of practical experience in the mobility world.
Okay. And for those people who don't know Snowflake, what do you guys do?
Yeah, so Snowflake is a data cloud storage company. And so we work, probably most companies use Snowflake in some manner. And just that, we're storing that data. We're potentially, maybe storing some of those avatars and Benita and all those people that AI come up will be out there in that cloud. So yeah, that's what we do.
Cool. Tara Hagen saying, so happy to see Dawn on the screen today. So Dawn, you're very experienced. You work with Snowflake. Tell us a bit about the Snowflake program. I mean, how many people would you typically move in a year, internationally or domestically?
Yeah. So Snowflake's 10 years old. And so the program is quite new and young. And so we move, I would say, around domestically more so within the United States, about probably 200 or so people in a year. And then internationally, many less, probably, 20, 30, 40, around that range at the most. So just a new and growing program. And that's what has been really exciting about being at Snowflake.
And yeah, it's a very cool tech company, says Nitsan. If Nitsan says it. So, Dawn, I mean, absolutely fascinating. I really want to get into a discussion with you about the types of policies you do, and we'll get on to that in a moment. But what is it? What do you get out of being a change maker? Well, you've joined us as a change maker, for which we're grateful. But what's in it for you? What do you like out of it?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about St. Jude. It's they help with improving cure rates for children's cancer, and the hospital is located in Memphis, Tennessee, here in the United States, and just has a long history. Probably the best thing about it is that any patient that goes there, their families, they don't pay anything. So they raise St. Jude raises all the money for that. And I've been a part of raising money for St. Jude for probably the last 30 or so years. I had to think about that before coming on the show. So
we've got a picture here. Hang on.
Yeah, that was from this year.
Tell us about this moment. That's a 10, I think.
So they have a marathon weekend. I did not run the marathon. I walk. I try to walk every day if I can. And so I did a 10K. And so that was me finishing the 10K this year in Memphis. And I meet up with, I think this is my 5th or 6th time in person for the weekend. And I meet up with some college friends and do the walk.
Cool. That's so exciting. So anyway, so I think now maybe we'll move on and we'll get into the discussion about CoreFlex. I know there's a lot of interest. We've got a lot of people in the audience today. So Dawn, you're going to be joined on stage with Russ Haynie. So let's just bring Russ Haynie on. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's bring onto stage Russ Haynie and start talking about CoreFlex, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hi, everybody. So I'm getting a bit of an echo. Dawn, can I ask you to mute yourself when we're not talking? Because I think we found in the green room that was the cause. So hopefully that makes the sound better for everybody out there in audience land. So we're going to be talking about CoreFlex. And I suppose, actually, we've got a great audience. We've got, I think, getting close to 200 people now watching us. So let's just start off by asking the audience a question. And the question is this: just in the biggest terms, what do you think of CoreFlex? Are you pro CoreFlex, or are you indifferent or anti it? And I'll give you 3 choices. I actually use this on LinkedIn. Your 3 choices are: it's a great solution, I love it, it's okay, it sort of does the job, or it's way too complex, no thanks. So in other words, are you a big advocate? Are you sort of iffy on it, or are you against it? So we'll get into that, and I'd love to see what the audience says. So we've got Michael Cadden saying he's okay, not an advocate. But Dawn, let's bring you into the conversation, because Dawn, I know you've worked. Well, tell us a bit. You've worked with CoreFlex in a couple of companies now. So tell us a bit about your experiences.
Yeah. Yes, I've definitely worked with CoreFlex in a couple previous companies, not currently at Snowflake, but definitely it is a good solution for our team members and our employees as they're not really sure what to expect, right? We don't know what to expect. As practitioners, we know, but people moving don't necessarily know. And so I think that's our role, is to help them with that. And, they're not thinking about those core items that they may need. And so I think that's really the value add that we can do. I understand some of the difficulties as well, which we'll talk about that. But
absolutely, I'm seeing a lot of comments coming in. I think all sorts of people talking different ways. I mean, I think there's quite a lot of excitement for it. But you, Dawn, you've actually worked with CoreFlex. Can you tell us about your experiences with CoreFlex in your previous employers and what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so working with CoreFlex, it really gave the option for what we hope it does, I think, with most practitioners, that they actually have, it gives employees a choice. So they can decide what I'm used to using points, and then the points would have a value. And so it gives, if you give the employees a certain number of points, then they are allowed to choose what they want to use those points for.
Let's get into points and dollars in a moment. I just want us to pull back. So you were previously at, was it Raytheon and Micron? And did they have CoreFlex? Is that fair to say?
Right. And it's actually, it's Collins Aerospace. It's owned by Raytheon now. But when I was there, it was Collins Aerospace. But yes.
So you've had very hands-on experience of actually running a CoreFlex program.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, I mean, because a lot of people are looking at it and they're looking at the first time, it's a bit theoretical, but for you, it's been very, very real. By the way, that survey, I've been seeing lots of comments. We actually ran it on LinkedIn, and these were the results. 42% of the people who responded to our poll said it was a great idea. 37% says it does the job, and only 21% said that they don't like it. It was too complex. So basically it was 79% thought it was either good or great, and 21% were a bit there. Kirsty making, I prefer the points-based system. We're going to get on to points as well in a moment, Kirsty. That's very much on the agenda for the discussion. But Russ, bringing you into the conversation, your experience of it. So you've been advising lots of companies on it, and I know you've been doing research on it. Do you want to tell us just a bit about what you've been doing?
Yeah, of course. And I'm so happy to join the stage with you, Brian and Dawn, to hear about your experiences as well. I have been quite busy lately working on some CoreFlex research for Benivo. We just closed a CoreFlex benchmark survey and had wonderful participation. And for anyone in our audience today who took the time to complete our survey, thank you for that. We'll be revealing the full results via a published summary report. As participants, you'll get an early view into those results. We'll distribute those out by the end of the month. And then in April, we will publish the report publicly, so anyone who's interested can see the results. We had 64 companies participate, which was great. And I would say, from my perspective, if there was one aha moment that I've had so far in analyzing the results, it's that I really think that as an industry, we've reached an inflection point with CoreFlex where this policy type is no longer kind of an emerging trend or something that's out there or new and different. This is ingrained in our industry in a way that now the majority of our respondents are telling us that they do have CoreFlex policies in place. And, I was a bit skeptical because when you issue a survey that's focused on CoreFlex, you would expect that it's mainly going to attract folks who either have the program type or are very interested in it. So you would expect the results to be a little bit skewed, but it actually tracks with broader industry studies that have been done that aren't exclusively focused on CoreFlex, but do ask about the approach. And we're seeing that those broad industry surveys are also telling us that we are now at the point where a majority of companies do, in fact, utilize this approach. So, with that, I would say that we're seeing not just broad adoption of the approach, but we're seeing very mature maturing approaches within the core flex spectrum. So our survey has yielded some very interesting results, and I'm so happy to be here to share some of those.
And that will be just to say a couple of things just for the audience. First of all, if you go onto the Benivo.com website, there is, and it's under the segment where I think it says resources or benchmark reports, there is a thing called the 9-step Core Flex playbook. And that is a 9-step process for how to implement. It's very, very practical. It goes into some things people have been commenting about already, like, who should decide on the flex? Should it be the employee or the employer, the points or dollars? It gets into all those. And it's completely free of charge. So if you're interested in looking at Core Flex and you're thinking about implementing it, then please do that. The other thing that people have said is, of course, that it can be a bit complex and you need technology to run it. It goes without probably no surprise to say that Benivo has got a specific Core Flex module in our system where you can run a Core Flex program, and we make no additional charge for that for our clients. So if you want to have a Core Flex, we're indifferent whether you want to have Core Flex or managed or lump sum as a company. But if you want to have Core Flex technology, then we like to think we've got some of the best that is out there. And again, you can find out details. But let's just step back and maybe a question, and I'll ask, maybe we should just start off with defining things a bit. Dawn, what is Core Flex? Let's just start at the top. What is Core Flex?
Yeah, so really from my perspective and what I've seen it be is it's having that set or group of items that, as a company, as an organization, you feel need to be given to the employee. So whether it's immigration, temporary housing, tax services, flights, those kinds of things that really, like I said before, employees that are moving, they don't typically, they think they know, but until you actually move, and having relocated myself, even being a part of global mobility, there were things that I forgot. And I've been in this industry for, many years. So I think that's the core piece. And then the flex piece is having items that you've identified that are important or could be important to employees, but it could be different for some employees, potentially storage or additional, temporary home finding, or some of those other types of things that you allow the employee. And I know I've seen in the comments, some people are saying, their definition is that the employee doesn't get to choose. In the programs that I was involved in, the employee absolutely got to choose their flexible benefits. And I think too that makes it, the company has the option to try to drive the behavior as well. So depending on what you're offering and how many points, that can also, but I think having those core items that, as a practitioner and as part of mobility, that really they should have, and they just don't necessarily know that they should.
Well, maybe we should dive into the 9-step playbook and some of the, because that's quite a logical framework of looking at how you should implement a flex policy. And the first step in this playbook is determining the budget strategy, because one thing that of course, is that if you have a traditional program, not all the benefits will be used. You might be offering, say, schooling or home search or something, and for one reason or other, people might not be using it. But as soon as you move to flex, people are going to start using pretty much everything, because the things they weren't using, they'll swap for something that they do want. So the first stage, I suppose, is to determine a budget strategy, how much you're prepared to spend. So, Russ, what's your experience? How should companies start off that first bit, to ensure costs don't get out of control?
Sure. I think that you've touched on a really important point about, the usage of benefits when you migrate from a kind of managed service approach toward a flexible approach. But that's the beauty of flexibility, right? You do want to afford the opportunity for employees to reallocate resources within a set budget to meet their priorities and the things that are most important to them. So it does beg the question of, when you're setting your budget, you do need to be conservative. You want to make sure that what you're telling the business is going to be spent on a particular move is in fact matched or very closely matched to reality. So you do need to spend a bit of time collecting and analyzing the historic average cost of benefits, look at usage rates, certainly. And if you're introducing benefits that are new in tandem with a Core Flex policy that you've not previously used, you can certainly lean on consultants like me to guide you through the process of, helping you understand kind of what are the average cost of those products and services that you want to introduce into the mix of your Flex policy. So, once you determine that budget strategy and you establish the allocation of funds that you want to dedicate to that Flex setting of benefits, then you can move on to the next steps. Really just, go ahead.
And what's been your perspective, Dawn? I mean, have you found that when you've been introducing Core Flex, it's been something that's brought extra cost in, or has it been used as a way of reducing cost?
I would say it does usually cost potentially a little bit more. But I mean, I think the value that it brings in providing those options to the employee over something like, just a lump sum of cash. I mean, I've seen that too, where, everyone loves cash and loves, dollars, pounds, euros, whatever we're getting. But when it all comes down to it and they really look at it, they do need guidance. And so I do think the value, but yeah, I think it can, hopefully you look at keeping it stable, but it can increase it slightly.
Okay, so the next stage then, I think, if we say the first one is to determine your budget strategy, and all of this is in the report, which I said is available to download. But the second one is you've obviously got to define what is core. So Russ, we've done a survey recently. What do people typically have as core benefits?
Sure. Well, most companies look at the core grouping of benefits as those things that really ensure compliance first and foremost. So you're definitely going to see things like tax assistance, tax support, categorized as core. When we talk about international mobility, immigration certainly fits that mix. And we also see companies focused on a grouping of benefits that I kind of like to call the nuts and bolts of relocation. Those things that you can reasonably assume that everyone is going to need, whether that's travel for the employee and their accompanying family members. Household goods, it's interesting. It was originally more of a core benefit, but when I talk about that maturing approach, I've definitely seen household goods begin to move out of the core bucket primarily, and a lot of companies are looking at making that a flexible benefit as well. But definitely anything that touches on compliance, on those nuts and bolts, kind of physical travel pieces, and also duty of care. When we talk about international moves in particular, anything dedicated to ensuring the health and safety of employees and their accompanying family while out on an assignment or moving internationally, those are definitely something.
Let me bring on a comment from Jacqueline Van Haften. She says, taking DE&I challenges, the war for talent and Gen Z issues into account, we advise to make partner support core. Actually, that ties in with a comment that Des McKell of NetExpat made when we were talking about this on LinkedIn. And he says they describe it as CareFlex, which I thought was quite an interesting phrase. And I suppose the point is about, Jacqueline's mentioned D&I, but I suppose you can also talk about duty of care in there as well. But to what extent do you think those sorts of benefits, family support benefits, should be in the core? Or what extent should they be in the flex? I mean, what's your experience in practice on that, Dawn?
Yeah, definitely. I love that CareFlex. That's amazing. I'm a huge DE&I. I'm passionate about it. And so I would say, yeah, in all practicality, as far as like international assignments, especially when you're sending family, you're sending people with children, and not only to, potentially non-traditional families where, there is partner support, that kind of thing. But I do think if you are sending a family, and I've seen this in the past, where really understanding what the needs may be for that family around potentially education, different things like that. I think things like ADHD and neurodiversity and all those kinds of things, right? Those are all buzzwords, but those are certainly things that are important. And it's that duty of care, making sure that those family members are taken care of, and they feel like the company is doing that for them, especially on assignment, when you want that to be successful, and you don't want the employee, you don't want her to have to worry about what's going on with the family and those kinds of things. You want them to be able to be successful.
Okay, so that's step 2, which is, I suppose, defining what's in the core. We've then got the other side of the coin, which is deciding what's in the flex. But actually, there's 2 stages there. The first stage and I'll take them together actually, but in our playbook, step 3 is defining who decides on the flex, and then the fourth one is if you like what is actually going to be in the flex. But let's just take the first one first. Okay, how do you go about deciding who should decide on flex? I mean, and Dawn, I think you said in your case it's always been the employee decision, not the employer decision about that. Because some companies do operate, maybe Russ, you can say a bit about it, how other companies operate flex where the employer decides.
Yeah, I really feel strongly that it should be the employee, especially in this world of remote work and all different kinds of things. And having gotten through the pandemic, I think, right, we've all gotten used to being in tune with what we feel we need and what our families may need. So I think now more than ever, it really is, the employee that's going to know that. That's my only experience, though. I don't have experience with, having leadership or the company make those choices.
Yeah. How would that work if you went the leadership way? That would be down to the line, really. Would it be to decide what they wanted to flex in or out? How do those programs work?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've seen in our survey results that it's really an interesting mix, and it's not necessarily, when we talk about core flex, I think companies interpret it different ways, and we see that in our survey results. It is a majority of respondents, and I do believe a majority of companies that view it as you've described, Dawn, which is primarily it's a matter of empowering the employee to make choices. But a lot of companies also extend core flex as a concept back into the business so that business stakeholders also have a say in being able to manipulate benefits on a case-by-case basis, or at least within a grouping of cases to suit their budget constraints or the current talent market that they're facing. I've talked a lot recently with clients about the importance of not just being on trend with benefits, but also being on brand. And I think it's so critical that companies really find that differentiation in the market, whether that's focusing on making family-focused benefits part of their core package, as you mentioned, Dawn, or just making sure that within the flex category of choices that there are ample opportunities to avail oneself of benefits that really meet all the varied needs. So it definitely does play into DE&I initiatives. But for companies today, I really think it's not just enough to kind of match your peer companies in terms of benefit scope, but you really want to look for those differentiators. So yeah, very interesting result.
Because, just following on that, because obviously you can put the traditional benefits in your flex. It might be, storage or more how transportation or longer temporary accommodation. There might be things you can put in the flex, but you can also put in some completely out there non-traditional benefits, because at the end of the day, it's not costing the company any more money if you're adding something. So Russ, give us some ideas of some non-traditional flex benefits that people are putting in.
I love this so much. It's one of the most exciting parts of this kind of evolution of core flex that I mentioned early on, this kind of maturing vision of what core flex can be. And we've seen a lot of creative approaches that involve introducing these non-traditional kinds of benefits into the mix of the core flex. And it could be really anything from offering the opportunity to be reimbursed for like a cleaning service, handyman services if somebody's leaving a property or purchasing a new property, purchasing furniture, or perhaps it's being able to have a meal service, deliver food in those kinds of transition periods where you and your family are just entering temporary accommodations, and maybe it's nice to kind of have more of an intensive meal service available.
Or even a handyman to build your flat pack furniture.
Yes, absolutely. There's so many ways that employees appreciate the company kind of getting out of the way and allowing them access to these things that are so important, and that the traditional policies were never really able to anticipate or address. So I'm really excited to see those things.
Okay, and I want to get on to a big one, a big area of discussion. It's already come up in some of the comments, and I've been vain your comment, and that's the debate about cash versus points. Okay, if you're running the program, let's say you've decided you are going to do Core Flex, should you be pricing your items in cash or in points? And I suppose almost as a subset of that is, should you let people cash out as well? Dawn, what's been your experience on this sort of cash versus points?
Yeah. So the programs that I've worked with, it's been points that equated to cash, but we've been in my other companies, we're transparent about that. But I think the points seem to be a little bit more manageable for the employees that I was working with. They could see that. I think too, once you throw dollars and you give, like, again, it's back to that lump sum. Somebody commented that it's Gucci money. If you give a dollar amount, 15,000, 20,000, they're thinking about all of these other things, and they're really not focusing on the things that that we know are going to be important to them. And then also do cashing out. I think cashing out, I've also been part of that as well. And cashing out can be an option too. But again, be careful about the behavior you want to drive, because depending on what the cash is, again, they may just want to take the cash thinking they can do whatever they need with it, and they really don't need the services.
It's the good the Jack. I just want to ask the audience, actually, in a word or in a sentence, I'm going to ask you the same question: points or dollars? Where are you on this? Should we have, if you're going to put in Core Flex, should it be points based or dollars based? I'd be interested. So just shove your answers up on LinkedIn, and we'll try and pull some of them onto screen. Russ, where are you on this, and what's the research been finding?
Yeah, it's definitely a point of debate within the Core Flex conversation about which is best for any particular company. I would always back up to where we were with the first step in the playbook. When we think about envisioning budget and setting those budgets, one of the key questions I would always ask of the company is, how are mobility costs budgeted and allocated within the organization? And if, it's very decentralized and any particular business unit is going to be charged for the actual cost of relocation or assignments, it may be that a budget approach is a better fit, because with a points approach, even if you are allocating those points based on a budget, based on a currency value in the background, you do have to embrace a bit of law of averages, right? Because in any particular case, the employee moving through that policy may incur a bit more than you projected or a bit less than you projected. And if there's no tolerance at a business unit level for those kinds of cases of above or below budget, you may want to go the cash route. But an interesting result from our survey is, in fact, most companies are moving toward a points-based approach. And the motivating factor for that is kind of disassociating the benefits and services within the flex category from their currency value. And companies would rather the employee face on the intrinsic or perceived value of those benefits rather than having them focus on the actual dollar value. It drives a different kind of behavior, a different kind of decision making. And so it's been part of the evolution of Core Flex. Originally, early in the Core Flex story, most companies were just simply allocating a budget, a flex budget. And now we're much more sophisticated, many more companies are using a points-based approach. And that was reflected in our survey results.
Yeah. And looking at the comments that people were making in the audience, there were one or two people that I very much respect in our industry who are saying cash. I would love to hear their, a bit more detail for their thinking. But I think it's fair to say that the vast majority, there's Robert Church, again, hugely experienced professional, very much in the dollars camp. But I think, the majority were probably saying points. And it's an interesting debate. Actually, when we did a survey on LinkedIn, and it's not really a sort of, a scientific survey, maybe like the one that you were doing, Russ. It's just a bit of fun on LinkedIn. It ended up being about 2-1 in favor, 70% points, 30% dollars. From my point of view, I tend to lean to points for a couple of reasons. One is I think it just allows you a little bit more finesse. But secondly, as Ellie says, points are the great equalizer. But I think the second point is as soon as you put cash in, I think you're going to build the pressure for people to say, well, can I have the cash? Whereas if the points are there, it's just one step removed to say, can I not take the points, convert the points into cash? So as Rena says, I'm totally in for points. So that's it. I mean, the other question that goes to it is, what about cash out? I mean, should you let people cash out? And I'll tell you where I am. I'm a no on that one. But Dawn, what's your view? Are you would you allow a cash out or not?
I mean, the programs that I've worked on did allow it, and I think Andy's comment at a lower amount than what the actual value would have been for services. Honestly, when I worked, and it's been a while that I worked in those programs, at the time, people took the cash. They would take the cash, quicker than they would take the services. Somebody also said like maybe a delayed cash out. So, maybe that could be helpful so that they really do take the time to make sure that they're using the services that they need.
Okay, so let's move on. We haven't got long left, and we've got 4 more points, I think, in our playbook. But I'll move through them quite quickly. The next stage, as I said, this playbook is on the Benivo website, and it is, I think it's a hugely useful document. And I say that as not being the person who authored it, so I think it's a hugely useful document. So do download it if you're interested in this. The next stage is how you manage the change. You've got to drive that through your organization. And this is before, I would say, before you actually start writing the policies, you've got to get leadership buy-in. And Dawn, what's been your experience of how you've managed that change? By the way, in the playbook, there is actually a protocol that's out there for the change management exercise. But Dawn, what's been your experience of managing the change management?
Yeah, no, I think just being very clear. I think leadership, when you explain how it's going to work, I mean, they see you as the expert, and if you're looking at the budget and the culture and all those kinds of things, they're good with it. I think it's really important to educate the employees, to make them understand the value and understand the reasoning, because several of the comments were talking about, again, people just don't know, and they think that they're going to take this cash and it's all going to be okay. And so I think it's a lot of educating and having the conversations. And I have been lucky enough to have RMCs that managed that for us and really did a great job with that.
Absolutely. I'm going to just move forward. I'm just in the constants of time here. The next stage is you actually write the policy. And I suppose, Russ, that's where, you would probably come in, certainly. And I know Benivo doesn't charge for your services for clients. So you would come in and help write the policy with or without the help of ChatGPT these days, of course. Yeah, you'll be out. That's for next week. But you'll be out there writing the policy. And I mean, I don't know if you've got any tips on policy writing, and I'll take the 90-second version as we move through the final stages here.
You know me well. I'll stay within that constraint. I would say just simple advice on policy is that it is a great opportunity to educate your constituents and your employees about the concept of CoreFlex, how it works. it needs to hit the basics. What is core? What is flex? What are the constraints of those flex elements? If you do allow a cash out option, is it capped? And, I'm not necessarily not in favor of cashing out, but I do think it needs to be within limits. But with technology today, there's really less emphasis on that written policy document. It's more about how your program interfaces with the user experience from a technology standpoint. So, definitely thinking ahead to how it integrates into a technical experience is very important as well. So I would, and my last bit of it,
that is really getting on to point 8 is choosing your tools, because whether you try and deal with spreadsheets or obviously I would urge a sophisticated platform like the Benivo platform, whatever platform you choose, you need to decide how you're doing it, whether you're doing it with tech, you're doing it through your RMC system, your own spreadsheets. But how would you go about making those decisions, Russ?
Well, the beauty of the technology solutions that are available today to complement these policy structures is that it really brings that consumer experience into reality for the employee. Early iterations of CoreFlex, they were great in theory. You're empowering the employee to make choices. But today, sophisticated technology can enable the employee to base their decisions on what their peers are doing, what previous folks moving through the policy decided to do and why, and what was the outcome of those decisions. It also enables very streamlined communication with downstream suppliers who deliver those services so that they can very nimbly respond to the decisions that the employee is making. So there's a whole host of reasons to, as you're writing policy, to think ahead to the technology and how those two interrelate.
All right. Okay. And just going back to point 8, I'm just going to pick out Robert's comment. He said dollars purely from an admin and implementation standpoint, and I'm okay with paying the cash. Okay. So I just wanted to put that up because we heard a lot about points. I wanted to sort of put the dollars argument out there as well. Mm-hmm. So we'd then come on to the last step, and I'll go back to you on this, Dawn, which is that you've implemented it, you've done it, okay? But the very final stage, there's always a loop, isn't there, in these things? The very final stage is to measure what you've done, to iterate, because nothing is ever perfect first time, and to optimize. And what's been your experience of that, of sort of, going around that loop in year 2 and 3?
Right. Yeah. Again, using an RMC, in my experience, you can get reporting, you can get data, you can evaluate that to see what's happening. And at one of the companies, right, that's where we realized everyone's pretty much cashing out. So in a certain grouping. So just looking at that data and seeing where you might have some areas to optimize.
Okay, so that is a 9-stage playbook. The survey, Russ, I know is going to be out in the next, it's going out to participants first, isn't it? And then you're going to be publishing the results in a few days' time. So many thanks to everybody who's taken part in that. What I'm now going to do is I want to bring back onto stage Julia and Tally as we round off the end of the show. So I've got everybody back. It's been, there's so much to talk about here with CoreFlex. And many thanks for all the audience for participating. But as Tally said, and I might have mentioned this before, but do register for next week's show. It's going to be out there. We're going to be promoting the bejesus out of it for next week, because this is so exciting to be interviewing a robot next week. We will actually have an earthly person there, which will be Nitsan Udam, but the special guest will be the robot. Tally, any final words from your perspective?
Yes, I want to remind people other than registered next week, please do nominate your partners and your colleagues.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. We are sadly out of time now. It's been wonderful seeing you all on this show. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. We will be back this time next week. Thank you to Julie Onslow Cole, as ever, for the immigration update, to Russ for the policy, for Tally for producing the show, but especially to our superstar guest, who Benito, in terms of the personality states earlier on when people were saying how much they love her. Dawn, it's been wonderful to have you on the show. And many thanks for everything you've done for Changemakers. And I know your passion for CoreFlex. Take care, everybody, and have a great week. Take care, everybody.